They tell the story as if it were simple: a garden, two trees, a choice good or evil, and then exile. But what if we have always been reading Eden through the wrong lens? What if the garden was never a stage for innocence, guilt, or punishment? What if it was, first and foremost, a myth beyond morality? Before law, before sin, before the words right and wrong existed, there was a space, a sanctuary not of judgment, but of becoming, a realm where boundaries were drawn not to exclude, but to define possibility. Imagine Eden not as a moral playground, but as an archetypal map, the primal landscape of the human psyche. Here lie no sinners, only seekers, no punishments, only transformations. In that ancient tale, trees become symbols, rivers become arteries of consciousness, and the serpent becomes the voice of choice, the echo of awareness itself. We have made Eden into a cautionary tale, a slogan printed in fear: do not eat. But the original myth did not preach obedience. It invited experience. It offered the possibility of knowing. In the hush before the first bite, there was no shame, only potential. No surveillance, only presence. No condemnation, only invitation. The garden was not a courtroom. It was a crucible, an arena in which the human spark might ignite. A silent question posed: what will you do when the boundaries of your world shift beneath you? Before morality, there was myth, a story not about right or wrong, but about how one moves from the seed of unknowing into the flame of self-awareness. When the narrative becomes moral, we forget this original current. We reduce an initiation to a lesson in obedience. We transform a rite of passage into a tale of eternal damnation. What if, instead, Eden was the first rite of passage, a place beyond innocence where all potentialities coexisted, where the childlike state of naivete was honored but destined to evolve? The garden's walls were not walls of prison. They were the edges of a canvas, the lines that frame possibility, the territory in which the human soul was first invited to paint its own destiny. And the moment of eating, not a crime, but a moment of emergence. Like a newborn's first breath, painful, disorienting, yet necessary to become human. No shame in that first breath, no blame in that first step, only the awe of consciousness meeting itself. So let us return to Eden, not as repentant exiles, but as curious pilgrims. Let us see the garden as the birthplace of human agency, a place beyond innocence, beyond sin, where the soul dared to ask, who am I? In that question lies the true garden, not lost in the past, but waiting within us still. Not a tale of guilt, but a myth of becoming. In Eden, 4 rivers flowed, not merely waters to drink, but currents of awareness, channels of the soul's unfolding. Their names, once whispered by priests, now seem exotic: Pishon, Gihon, Tigris, Euphrates. Yet these are not geographical markers alone. They are the elemental streams beneath the visible world, the primary flows of human perception. Pishon courses through the gold of the land, the dazzling brilliance of raw potential, the flash of insight before words form. It is the flash of awakening, the first glimmer that life is more than sensation. Gihon winds through Kush, the deep, hidden places within, where intuition and mystery dwell. Here, shadows hold secrets, and the soul learns to trust what cannot be seen. The Tigris runs swift, a river of action, the energy that moves thought into motion, that transforms insight into creation. It is the pulse that propels invention, the flow that turns vision into world. And Euphrates, broad and life-giving, is the river of communion, the pulse of relationship, empathy, and collective being. It is the shared current that binds one soul to another, weaving individual streams into a vast, living ocean. These four rivers surround the central tree of life, the axis of the garden, yet they also carve its boundaries. They define the contours of experience. They shape the fertile soil in which the seeds of awareness take root. To taste from one river is to awaken a single faculty. To stand at their convergence is to sense the totality of consciousness. The ancient storytellers knew water is the medium of transformation. In mist it becomes breath, in steam it becomes spirit, in underground streams it becomes memory. The Garden of Eden, cradled by these rivers, was not a place of static beauty, but a dynamic cruciblian alchemical vessel in which the soul's elements mixed, reacted, and emerged anew. To follow Pishan's course is to dive into mind's first spark, to feel the thrill of possibility. To wander Gihon's depths is to discover the mysteries held in silence, the power of hidden knowing. To race with Tigris is to harness the fire of will, to forge dreams into reality. To drift on Euphrates is to merge with others, to remember that no river runs alone. These rivers do not merely flow outward, they flow inward. They are invitations for the seeker to drink deeply of life's facets. They are paths of initiation, each stream a step toward wholeness. And, like all living waters, they resist confinement. They overflow, they flood, they reshape the landscape, reminding the traveler that consciousness too is fluid, ever shifting its course. When the boundary of Eden was breached, when the fruit was tasted, the rivers did not vanish, they transformed. Their courses changed. Their waters carried new sediments of experience, bearing humanity beyond the garden's limits. In exile, humankind became a river itself, flowing into unknown lands, carving new channels of understanding, spreading life wherever it journeyed. And still those primal currents run beneath our daily lives. We feel them in moments of clarity, in secret intuitions, in the rush of creativity, in the deep bonds of compassion. We follow their courses when we write, when we build, when we love. To return to Eden is not to reclaim lost innocence, but to re-enter these rivers to drink once more from the waters of potential, of mystery, of will, of communion. To honor the garden is to honor the currents within, to flow with them, to let them shape us as much as we shape them. So stand at the source of these mythic streams, feel their cool touch on your lips, hear their hidden music in your veins. Know that the true Garden of Eden is not a place we left behind, but the living confluence of rivers inside us, a lever flowing, ever deepening, ever calling us home. In the heart of Eden stood two trees, not mere flora, but pillars of existence, the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. We see them in children's books, apples, bright green leaves, a simple choice, but their roots run far deeper into the soil of myth, psyche, and purpose. The tree of life is the axis mundi incarnate. Its branches stretch toward the sun, drawing down light into living wood. Its roots plunge into the subterranean waters of being. To touch its bark was to brush eternity. Its fruit granted not immortality of form, but continuity of spirit and endless flow through cycles of being. In its shade, the soul found rest from the weight of time. Opposite, yet entwined, stood the tree of knowledge. It carried the burden of duality. Its fruit was not poison nor panacea, but privs shattering unity into the spectrum of experience. To taste its flesh was to awaken the discerning mind, to feel desire and fear, beauty and loss, creation and destruction. Its leaves whispered paradox, that to know good, one must stand beside evil, that light cannot be known apart from shadow. Together, these trees form the gate of awareness. The tree of life offered communion with the whole, inviting a return to oneness. The tree of knowledge beckoned toward differentiation, to stand as a distinct self among the many. One granted innocence, the other empowered choice. One invited rest, the other demanded engagement. Both were sacred, both essential. In Kabbalistic tradition, the tree of life becomes the Sephirotic mapped-in emanations radiating from the divine source, each sphere a facet of being. From crown to kingdom, the path unfolds, mirroring Eden's promise that life and knowledge are two sides of the same jewel. And only by walking the path between them can one ascend back to unity, no longer as naive seed, but as conscious fruit. Hermetic teachings echo this duality. The heart must balance the eternal and the ephemeral, the divine spark and the human flame. To cling only to the tree of life is to wander in blissful ignorance. To grasp only the tree of knowledge is to be trapped in endless judgment. Wisdom lies in the tension between them, tasting both fruits without being consumed. Their roots interlace beneath the garden soil, reminding us that life without awareness is sterile, and knowledge without compassion is barren. The ancients sculpted this vision into their myths, painted it on their temple walls, encoded it in sacred geometry. The concentric circles of mandalas, the intersecting lines of yantras speak of timing and tension, of union birthed through division. When the first humans walked between these living statues, they moved in a landscape of teaching. Each leaf, each branch, each whispered wind carried instruction. The garden was a temple, the trees, its priests. Yet we have reduced them to moral symbols, good versus evil, missing their invitation to embody both. The moment the fruit was consumed, the trees did not vanish. They became the allegory we live, one within our chest, its roots in the infinite, and one within our mind, its branches probing complexity. We carry them still, one as the longing for unity beyond form, the other as the curiosity that drives every human endeavor. Our task is not to choose one over the other, but to navigate their communion, to drink from the tree of life that our souls remember belonging, and to savor the fruit of the tree of knowledge that our minds crave understanding. Only then does Eden bloom again, no longer a distant myth, but a living garden within, where innocence and insight walk hand in hand. There was a hush in the garden, a silence that held all possibility. And then, a whisper, a voice neither cruel nor kind, but clear, clear as a blade of grass lit by morning dew. It slithered through the leaves, not with malice, but with purpose. "Eat," it said, "taste." The serpent was no mere creature. It was the guardian of threshold, the keeper of transformation. It did not lie. It did not tempt with falsehood. It offered something deeper. Gnosis. Not sin, not shame. It offered awakening. To eat the fruit was to cross a boundary drawn in silence, to awaken from the dream of innocence into the waking world of knowing. In that single bite, the human spark became a flame. The first flash of self-awareness flickered in the soul. Suddenly, the world shifted. Colors deepened, shapes sharpened, sound and scent all resonated with new meaning. They saw themselves and each other not as part of a seamless whole, but as separate currents in the river of life. And fear rose. Fear of the self, fear of the other, fear of choice itself. But the serpent, it had given no curse. It had given a gift. a key to the labyrinth within, a torch for the dark corridors of mind. In Gnostic texts, the serpent is Sophia's whisper, the spark of divine wisdom teaching the soul to remember its origin beyond matter. It is the teacher, the midwife of the soul's birth. It does not condemn, it does not promise paradise. It offers a mirror. And once you see, you cannot unsee. You cannot return to the sleep of Eden. Your heart carries the echo of that first breath of awareness. The walls of the garden did not keep evil out. They held innocence in. The serpent showed that boundaries serve the naive, but crumble for the awakened. To call it betrayal is to misunderstand the nature of growth. There is no becoming without breaking. And so, the serpent coiled through myth, not as villain, but as herald. A herald of humanity's true journey, not toward punishment, but toward gnosis. The fruit was more than flesh. It was remembrance. A remembrance that the garden was never about innocence, but about awakening. And in that awakening, we discovered our true exile, the exile from unknowing, the flight from eternal sleep into the bright, uncertain dawn of consciousness. They did not fall, they rose, cast out from the garden, but into themselves, into the expanse of human possibility. Exile was never punishment, it was initiation, a gate thrown open to the wilderness of being. They walked from Eden with new eyes, seeing sky as promise, earth as challenge, each breath a sacred boundary. No longer tended by gentle streams alone, they learned to navigate deserts, mountains, and storms, each terrain a teacher, each hardship a lesson in becoming. In exile, they built the first fires not stolen, but born of necessity and will. They fashioned tools not just from stone, but from the spark that danced in their minds. They tasted honey for the first time, pressed grapes into blood-red wine, felt the ache of longing for what was lost, and recognized it as the shape of desire. Exile thrust them into time, into seasons that turned without mercy, into years that carved wrinkles around the eyes, into generations that carried the story of a garden they could no longer touch. But in that story lay the seed of awakening. For to know loss is to know longing, the very impulse that drives creativity, that births art, that fuels dreams. In exile, they became pilgrims not of a distant home, but of the moment. Each step forward a pilgrimage into the unknown heart of existence. And as they wandered, they planted new gardens, temples of earth and stone, echoes of Eden shaped by memory. Each altar a reminder that exile is not barren, but fertile ground. They learned the rites of the moon, the prayers of the wind, the rituals of harvest and hearth, crafting a new Eden within the circle of humanity. Their eyes, once veiled by innocence, now saw the thread that wove earth to sky, man to spirit, life to death to life again. Exile did not sever them from the divine, it expanded their vision. It taught them to find sanctity not only in gardens of perfection, but in the broken places where growth fights through rock and ruin. And in their wandering, they forged the true path of humanity, not as residents of paradise, but as creators of it, as gardeners of the sacred, planting seeds in the soil of the soul where any garden can grow. Exile was not the end of a story, but the first page in the epic of becoming. He raised his hand, and the world trembled. Cain, the firstborn of exile, carried more than guilt. He carried a spark of rebellion, a seed of knowledge sown in blood. God's mark was not a curse, but a seal, a sign of distinction, not to condemn, but to protect. He was no longer of Eden, yet neither fully outside grace. His mark bound him to wander, yes, but also to remember. Marked, he became first in a line of seekers, those who carry hidden fire beyond the rules of paradise. From Cain's bloodline rose tribes that moved apart from the rest, keepers of strange arts, guardians of forbidden lore, brothers and sisters bound by the seal of awareness. They learned to read stars not as distant lights, but as alphabets of fate. They understood the tongues of beasts, the language of stones, the melody of hidden waters. Their voices whispered in shadows called sorcery, called witchcraft, called heresy, and so they hid in caves, in forests, in the undercurrents of civilization. Yet they were never truly lost. Their lineage persisted in the veiled symbols of art, in the coded rituals of mystery schools, in the silent knowing of healers, in each spark of insight that flared in the soul. They became the brotherhood of seekers, bound by the mark, united by purpose, not a blood feud, but a covenant of knowing. For the mark of Cain was never shame. It was the gift of difference, the awareness of choice, the privilege of bearing the first question beyond where and what into why. And so they wandered, the marked ones, casting seeds of knowing into every land. And through their hidden paths, the light of Eve's first dawn continued to flicker, a flame passed hand to hand, generation to generation, until the world would awaken again. The garden was never confined to one story. Its boundaries spilled across cultures, whispered in distant tongues, etched into legends far and wide. In Sumer's Dilmun, they spoke of a land where the sun rises, a place of pure water and eternal life, a haven before the world grew harsh. In Vedic lore, Svargaloka gleamed above the clouds, a realm of celestial bliss, where souls danced among devas before the descent into mortal coil. In Norse sagas, Idun tended her golden apples, fruits of youth that sustained the gods until the tide of time reclaimed them. The Maya whispered of Tamawanchan, the cradle of gods shrouded in mist, where the first maize sprang from the earth and humanity was formed. Across the Pacific, Maori legends told of Hawaii, the islands of origin, where spirits sailed before incarnation and where the return awaited the worthy. Each myth unique in language, yet woven from the same thread, a primal garden, a realm of unbroken harmony, a beginning steeped in wonder. These echoes were not copies, nor borrowed tales. They were the reverberations of a single pulse that once beat at the heart of existence. The human soul remembers. It recalls a time before boundaries, before fear, before division. In every mythic garden, we see the imprint of Eden not as innocence lost, but as unity remembered. The rivers flow again as streams of milk and honey. The trees bear fruit that heals. The serpents guard gates of transformation. And always there is a tree, the axis where sky meets soil, where spirit meets flesh. These stories rose independently, like flowers blooming along the same fault line, their roots drawn to an underground spring of collective memory. They remind us that Eden was never a single place, but a state of being, a resonance in our bones, a frequency we carry across lifetimes and lands. When we dream of paradise, we dream not of what we were, but of what we can become, a garden within, where rivers of consciousness converge, where life and knowledge stand side by side, where exile is but the path back to ourselves. In the tapestry of world myth, Eden's pattern endures, guiding, calling, echoing a promise that beyond every fall, beyond every loss, there lies a garden still waiting to be found in the secret spaces of the soul. There is a garden beyond time, a garden we carry in the hush between heartbeats. It is neither lost nor found, but remembered. Eden was never merely a place, it was the template of becoming, a pattern woven into our bones, a melody played on the strings of the spirit. To redeem the garden is not to return to innocence, it is to reclaim wholeness, to walk its pathways once more, not as naive children, but as conscious gardeners. Close your eyes and listen. Feel the four rivers flow within you, the spark of insight, the depth of intuition, the will to create, the pulse of connection. See the two trees rise in your chest, one branching toward the infinite, the other bearing fruit of awareness. Hear the serpent's whisper, not as temptation, but as invitation to know yourself fully, to taste the sweetness in the shadow. Now open your eyes and step into the world with Eden in your steps. Every choice becomes a planting, every thought a seed, every breath a blessing. The exile taught us tools, the marked ones passed down fire, the myths echoed across seas. Now the true garden blooms in acts of compassion, in moments of wonder, in the silent spaces of being. Redemption is not a pardon, it is a blossoming. It is the turning of dust to soil, and soil to life. It is the unity of life and knowledge, the dance of roots and branches, the alchemy of every human soul. Eden was never about innocence. It was always about awakening. And now, as we walk this garden, we know. We are the keepers. We are the soil. We are the seed. We are the harvest. And in this living Eden, we become whole again and again, cycle upon cycle, breath upon breath, seed upon seed.